We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway.
Yes. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single country. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 2,400 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. But what many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored. It was 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life, opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. It's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor.
But not only did they give the land, they built
land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $745 billion reclaimed. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the mountain. Good evening in the Central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective. Making the case for reparations. Making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering. And this evening, family, it is another edition of Ida B. Wells 2.0 presents Anti-Black Racism. Yes, family. Keeping the spotlight on all the puckery, on all the benign neglect, on all the symbolism, on all the identity and respectability politics as the government, the Democrats and the Republicans alike are working on their 400-year plan to tether ADOX to the bottom of the Titanic as the anchor of this country with 3 Ks. Capitalism. Tell it like it TI is, bringing you that TRU on the 1-year anniversary of Mr. Floyd's annihilation by the white inferior race soldier Glacier Donkey Chauvin. I thank you one and all. Black Magic, Brian, Amos, Terry, you guys are the wind beneath my wings. There's going to come a time when I won't even be able to find y'all. There'll be 100,000 people on the line. That's the day that you guys are helping to give birth to. So forgive me in advance when I get at least 100,000 woke ADOX to be over here and not messing around with the celebrity news channels. Here's to you. Know that you are the faithful co-host, the faithful and loyal, and know that you are the founding comrades of a very important reparationist movement, consistently lending your energy to not only support the show, but to support ADOX in receiving the reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. You guys are on the right side of history. And I thank you for stopping everything you do, some of y'all twice a day, to roll with your sister. I can't thank you enough for being the wind beneath my voice and supporting me in these efforts to keep the reparations discussion front and center. Even if it's just amongst us for now. But I'm telling you, we are really making headway and making strides. And your support of this show, you watching and sharing and liking and subscribing and donating. Shout out to Amos. Thank you for your gift. Listen, if you'd like to give the kind that folds to support me in my efforts to offset some of the expenses of bringing you these lives twice a day, Monday through Thursday, the information is right below you. And just coming over here to play with me and listen to me cut a fool, because you know I got to laugh to keep from crying. Y'all, I make so many jokes. Thank you, Brian, for always making jokes. Amos, you're funny too. I just got off the phone with Amos. Terry Lewis, I see you, family. Thank you, guys. Because like I said, in a minute, I'm going to get enough momentum in this fight that I won't even be able to see you. We're rebuilding after being shadow banned and disabled. 4,500 subscribers in Facebook. That's gone. So I'm starting over, and I thank you for being a part of my new beginnings a third time. They said the third time is a charm. With that said, family, let's jump into today's topic because it is lengthy. It is lengthy. I had to rearrange and take off my soldier, Sasha. I had to take that story off. That sister that was Black Lives Matter protester, shot in the back of the head. She's come through surgery successfully. We'll pick that story up tomorrow on the anti-Black racism segment. Now, tomorrow I may try to come to you earlier. Like it may be back to back. You know, I'm a track mom. Tomorrow's another track meet. If I'm not front and center, the world falls completely apart. I am investing in another leg of my retirement plan in my child. Okay, so I got to show up so the return will be sweet and she won't stick me away in somebody's home. But with that said, family, let's jump into it. It is the anniversary of our brother, Mr. George Floyd's execution. And I want to talk about it and revel in it. And let's get into it because it's rich. I mean, Biden even invited the family to the White House. More symbolism. Where is the George Floyd Act that ends qualified immunity? Nothing else on there would have saved George Floyd. I've already done that show. Look it up. Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti in Washington in May. Mr. Garcetti agreed to cut $150 million from the police budget. Oh, wait. What am I doing here? This is funny that I jumped to that. I just got a text. And you know, of course, I got to share with you guys when I get the folks all the way together. I just got a text from Mayor Garcetti's pundits, okay? Now, listen here. I got to share about it because the puckery is real. I don't know how you don't ever give a damn about black folks, but only when it comes to this vaccine. They giving out weed and donuts. Every day you can get a Krispy Kreme. Just show them that you had a vaccination one time. You don't have to show it every time. And they're going to give you diabetes in exchange for proof that you took this vaccination. So Garcetti's office had the unmitigated gall to write me. Hello, my name is Justin and I work for Mayor Robert Garcia. Oh, I thought it was Garcetti. Mayor Robert Garcia. We are just checking in to make sure you've gotten your free COVID-19 vaccine. You don't even need an appointment. Click here for locations and more info. Have a great rest of your day and let me know if you have any questions. Now, y'all know I was born to talk, right? And when you're born to talk, oh, I got to come out of this jacket, y'all. My own private summer. It's the circle of life. I freeze my daughter out. Forgive me, I'm just in my sport tank, but whatever. Y'all, I'm clothed, okay? I had to come out that jacket. Now, you know when you're born to talk, and God sends you like he did Moses to get the people together and to tell Pharaoh to let the people go. And you tried to send Aaron, but that was an epic fail. And you finally have enough of white supremacist institutional systemic racism come for your bounty, which is directly from God, okay? I know the sponsors, but the Most High. And you realize you can run, but you can't hide from institutional systemic racism. It knows no pedigree. It doesn't give a damn that I'm degreed and have diverse work experience. None of that matters with institutional systemic racism. When you know all these things, you have to respond in kind. So I said, I don't believe in vaccines that haven't been means tested for at least 20 years. I am not interested in being your guinea pig. While you're at it, can you ask the mayor, what is he doing about the homelessness, unemployment, and unaffordable housing for American descendants of chattel slavery? Why is he more concerned about us getting vaccines than he is our ability to thrive in Southern California? I guess he's too busy making it mandatory that we be bilingual just to get a job interview. And when we show up, we don't have the complexion for the protection for hire. Run me those answers. You've already received mine. I got no response. I wonder if he'll relay it. Okay, so let's get into, I just saw this mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. And so I don't know who this Robert Garcia person is. Maybe he is in Long Beach. Who the hell knows? I don't know. All these immigrants taking over in every position of public office while my people are ethnically cleansed out. I really don't care. So I tell them like it is. Go meditate on that and give me those answers. That's what I'd like to know. So back to the text. Okay, so this thing is giving live updates. So let me go to this article and then I'll fool with that next. Now, this lawmakers see promise in police reform negotiations as Biden plans meeting with George Floyd's family. Now, when you've got someone like Kuhn Clyburn saying to take out the end of qualified immunity, you realize your own people are setting you up to be executed by state sanction into ethnic cleansing proportion. That's what they do. They get black white supremacists to undo us in every level of government. Moving on. President Joe Biden will mark the solemn anniversary of George Floyd's death this week by hosting Floyd's family at the White House, giving the president a fresh chance to pressure lawmakers on Capitol Hill to reach an agreement on police reform legislation. Well, Biden, you didn't need the George Floyd's family. You didn't even need to host them. You could have just done unto ADOX what you did for Asians while weaponizing the execution of George Floyd to protect them when 68% of their assaults are verbal and they have a median national income of $87,000 to American descendants of child slavery, median national income of $41,000. How easy, how much easier it would have been to simply make this an executive order, to make an executive order of the anti-lynch bill so that we can live to enjoy the reparations we are demanding in the trillions over multi-generations, you see. The symbolism of having the Floyd family come to the White House when the White House is filled with domestic terrorists, as borne witness to by the insurrection. I don't see nobody getting executed or going to jail for that insurrection. You're trying to appeal to a humanity and a people that are woefully neglectful of ADOX by weaponizing George Floyd's family to get the Congress to pass the George Floyd Act when they want to take out the only thing that may have saved his life. The only thing that matters in that act is ending qualified immunity. But you want more symbolism for black folks to sheep walk to the polls come 2022. To get a blue Congress when 8 of your Democrats voted against the $15 an hour minimum wage, which doesn't really matter to ADOX because we're the highest unemployed and the highest underemployed. The need for greater accountability in policing has only grown more pronounced in the years since Floyd was killed by a white police officer who was convicted of murder in April. Egregious cases of police brutality, as well as examples of the disproportionate use of force by police toward Black and brown people, have surfaced constantly in the news since Floyd's death, creating a new level of awareness about racial injustice in police encounters at a time when a majority of Americans believe that major changes are needed in policing. Let's look at an update of the numbers of Black folks killed by the police since Floyd. Welcome to the live. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notification. I'm moving the spirit on this show. It is what it is. Okay, this has not been updated. This is April 20th. 181 black people, unarmed blacks, 181 black people have been killed by police since George Floyd's death. Now, we know it's more than that. We just had Mr. Green. Well, that was 2 years ago. We just found out about it. We know it's more than this. This has been since April 20th. Let me ask another question. How many blacks have been killed by the police since April 20th? Hold on. (2021). Okay, let's see here. Al Jazeera. Let's see here. What does he say about it? Since Floyd's death exactly a year ago, the group has recorded at least 1,068 police killings across the country, an average of 3 killings every day. Still's not answering my question. We won't spend long on it. Okay, so here we go. Since George Floyd was killed last year, police have killed at least 1,000 other people. Police are killing at similar rates to past years. The majority of the people on this thing are black, but it's still not giving me the number. Yeah, it's not telling me specifically how many black people have been killed of the 1,068 in the course of a year. I want to know specifically the number of black people. So they talk percentages, but it's not giving me what I'm looking for. We'll get back to this. They don't like telling us nothing anymore. They're hiding all of the truth by design. Back to the text. Welcome to the live. I'll come over about 10 minutes before the show is closed, okay? To read your comments. The nation was confronted this past week with gut-wrenching new body cam videos showing the fatal encounter of Ronald Green. That's another problem with getting an accurate count of the number of black folks that have been executed by the race soldiers, because we don't know all of the people being executed by the race soldiers because they're hiding the body cam footage of all of it. If they turn the body cameras on, so they can say 1,068, it can be 10,000. We don't know. We only know about the ones they tell us about. The nation was confronted this past week with gut-wrenching new body cam videos showing the fatal encounter of Ronald Green, a black motorist with Louisiana State Police, who tased, kicked, and dragged him in 2019 before he died in custody after a traffic pursuit. Green's family and their attorneys say police initially said Green died as a result of a traffic accident, but body cam video of the incident portrayed a very different reality. Biden had initially hoped that the key lawmakers involved in police reform negotiations, including Democratic Representative Karen Bass of California, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, could craft a compromise by the anniversary of Floyd's death on today. But Booker said Sunday that deadline will not be possible. Booker told CNN's Dana Bash that the group has made meaningful progress, but that Democrats and Republicans are still far apart in their views on how to deal with qualified immunity, which shields police officers from civil lawsuits. Quote, we need to at some point get qualified immunity. That's what I'm determined to at this negotiating table to get, Booker said on State of the Union. This is one of the big issues that we're working very hard to see if we could bridge this wide gulf. The New Jersey senator said a number of Republican allies have been partners in keeping the negotiations going, a promising underpinning to the hopes of compromise in a deeply polarized Washington. Quote, I wouldn't have a negotiating partner in Tim Scott if Senator Minority Leader Mitch McConnell didn't believe that this is something we should be at the table trying to work through. All this pandering, I cannot, it's nauseating. People like Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina on their side. I know that there are people who believe that we should be at the table trying to negotiate a solution. Whether we get there or not still remains to be seen. Oh, will this go on like the 100-year anti-lynch bill that is yet to be made into law or made an executive order of? For the very Democrats who said they have our back since 87% of our electorate, not me, voted them into the White House? I am for weaponizing our vote by delivering a red top of the ticket and a blue Congress to protect the over 53% of ADOCs who rely on government assistance by design of institutional systemic racism until they cut the check in the trillions over multi-generations. A trifecta of either party gets us this. Benign neglect. It gets us a president who weaponizes what happened to George Floyd against ADOCs to give entitlements and protections and $80.5 billion to Asians. He noted the irony of the fact that he has met with Scott and Bass to discuss the legislation in the Strom Thurmond room of the U.S. Senate, which is named after the long-serving senator from South Carolina who supported racial segregation, as did Biden. You have 3 African Americans sitting around a table trying to work this out, Booker said. The Democratic senator said the White House has been supportive of the talks. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Friday that the administration has faith in the bipartisan negotiations. And she noted that Biden used his address before a joint session of Congress to reiterate his view that the police reform is long overdue, that the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act is exactly the right form and bill that could help get that done while beginning to rebuild trust in communities. How about an executive order so they can make up their minds? Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about, I don't feel like reading the rest of that. It's fluff and stuff. So today, a small group of Black Lives Matter demonstrators in Manhattan blocked the traffic through the Holland Tunnel on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. Hold on one second. I want to go to a different update. I want to see the CNN version. That's too choppy. Okay, so this was updated 10 minutes ago. Teen who recorded Floyd's murder speaks out as Americans gather to mark his death. This is a New York Times update. Okay, so as I mentioned, President Biden hosted the Floyd family at the White House on the anniversary of his murder. More symbolism, but legislation that bears his name has stalled in Congress. Morning gunshots rang out at the spot where he died in Minneapolis. Okay. Children are a notable presence at the memorial events. From Minneapolis to Oxford, England, children and families had a notable presence at events honoring George Floyd today. In Washington, members of Mr. Floyd's family, including his daughter Gianna, age 7, met with President Biden at the White House. In Minneapolis, Mr. Smith, 8, practiced leading a chant with a megaphone as families posed for photos at George Floyd Square. And in St. Paul, Minneapolis, children marched or were carried in a rally near the Capitol led by families supporting families against police violence. In Atlanta, a call to shield children from police violence. Just a mile from the Atlanta birthplace of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a few dozen activists congregated at a downtown park on Tuesday to commemorate George Floyd and to demand justice for people of color who have been mistreated by the police. Were disproportionately executed by the race soldiers, as were disproportionately the most unemployed, underemployed, lacking in home ownership, set up for the preschool to prison pipeline, disproportionate numbers of us behind bars. Just to let you know who this is really happening to, by and large. Asians who got protections from the no Biden, okay? 68% of their assaults are verbal. Less than 1% of them have ever been killed by the police. Less than 1% of them are in prison. The My Daddy Changed the World demonstration, which nods to comments by Mr. Floyd's daughter Gianna, spotlighted the plight of children afflicted by racial profiling and police violence. We want justice. Activists demand accountability at police headquarters today in New York. The spring breeze and chirping of birds belied the tense scene outside One Police Plaza, the New York Police Department headquartered in Lower Manhattan this afternoon. About 36 activists marked the day with emotional speeches and calls for police accountability. This is the epicenter of the injustice that's going on in New York City, said John Larkins, a 32-year-old carpenter who spoke to the crowd about his experience of being beaten and tasered by the police in Troy, New York in 2011. In Dallas, activists are frustrated by a lack of progress on police reforms. Despite some momentum for racial justice nationally, Dominique Alexander said today that he and other activists in Dallas are on the defense on the anniversary of Mr. Floyd's execution. My word. Most pieces of the state sweeping George Floyd Act aimed at police reform withered without a real chance of passing. The city's Democratic mayor has resisted calls to decrease police funding, and the Republican-controlled state legislature has pushed a rash of proposals to limit classroom discussions of racism in history and current events. How can you build a new generation without talking about the past and the failures of America? Mr. Alexander wondered. Darnella Frazier, the teenager who recorded George Floyd's murder, speaks out. Darnella Frazier, the young woman who took out her cell phone on a Minneapolis street to record a video of a white police officer as he knelt on George Floyd's neck that would ricochet around the world, released a powerful statement on Tuesday addressing the first anniversary of Mr. Floyd's death. Quote, "A year ago today, I witnessed a murder. The victim's name was George Floyd," she wrote in a Facebook post. "I knew his life mattered. I knew that he was in pain. I knew that he was another Black man in danger with no power." Miss Frazier, forgive me, was just 17 at the time, she said, and was walking her 9-year-old cousin to the corner store, unaware of how drastically her life would be altered. Quote, it changed me. It changed how I viewed life. It made me realize how dangerous it is to be Black in America, she wrote. We shouldn't have to walk on eggshells around police officers, the same people that are supposed to protect and serve. Miss Frazier, who is now 18, recounted what she went through after Mr. Floyd was killed. She would wake up to reporters at her door. She couldn't sleep well for weeks and used to shake so badly at night that her mother would have to rock her to sleep. She had panic and anxiety attacks every time she saw a police car. Though it's a little easier now, she said, she nonetheless carries the burden of that day with her. Quote, I still hold the weight and trauma of what I witnessed a year ago, she said. A part of my childhood was taken from me. Ms. Frazier recorded the video and uploaded it to Facebook, igniting international protest over racism and police abuse. She testified at the trial of the officer, the race soldier Glacier Donkey Derek Chauvin, my words, and said in March that she feels regret for not physically engaging the officers, but that they were the ones ultimately at fault. And she could have been executed. They would have blown any one of those bystanders away and would have called it justifiable, would have called it reasonable and necessary. And then we would not have gotten the conviction on all 3 charges. They would have flipped it because they were attempting to flip it at the very trial. Chauvin's attorney was trying to blame it on the bystanders, blame it on the paramedics, blame it on Mr. Floyd himself. A lot of people call her a hero, she noted in her statement on today, but she doesn't see herself as one. She was just in the right place at the right time, she said. That's how God works. Through expected and unexpected channels, family. A lot of people, okay, behind this smile, behind these awards, behind the publicity, I'm a girl trying to heal from something I am reminded of every day, she said. Everyone talks about the girl who recorded George Floyd's death, but to actually be her is a different story. She added, my video didn't save George Floyd, but it put his murderer away and off the streets. Something the Minneapolis Police Department didn't even have the cojones to do. It took a 17-year-old Miss Frazier's viral video to put this Glacier Donkey away. Because the Minneapolis Police Department said his 8 other attempts at the kill choke, at the blood choke, were reasonable and necessary. And at the end of her post, she spoke directly to Mr. Floyd. George Floyd, I can't express enough how I wish things could have went different. But I want you to know, you will always be in my heart, Miss Frazier wrote. I'll always remember this day because of you. May your soul rest in peace. May you rest in the most beautiful roses. This is another part of her speech. You can view George Floyd any way you choose to view him, despite his past, because don't we all have one? He was a loved one, someone's son, someone's father, someone's brother, and someone's friend. We the people won't take the blame. You won't keep pointing fingers at us as if it's our fault, as if we are criminals. I don't think people understand how serious death. That person is never coming back. And nobody wants to talk about how we became criminals. Nobody wants to talk about the institutional systemic racism that makes many of us criminals. Nobody wants to talk about the most unemployed, the most underemployed, being redlined into environmentally hazardous, racist communities and tenement housings, being executed by state sanction to make room for gentrification, to miseducate us for the preschool to prison pipelines, to deny us access to loans, to own businesses in the very communities where we live, and make the Asians and the Indians and the Hispanics rich, while trying to make us the face of anti-Asian racist sentiment. Nobody wants to talk about how the 8 Democrats denied a $15 an hour minimum wage that really wouldn't serve Black folks because we can't get jobs because many of us have to be bilingual now. And the quotas of our affirmative action are being filled by white women, immigrants, and LGBTQIA before our Black men can get gainful employment, before our Black women can get gainful employment. Nobody wants to talk about how we have been killed and robbed of resources, which makes us criminals and murderers. Mr. Floyd's life was taken over an alleged counterfeit $20 bill. Nobody wants to talk about the $35 billion Trump gave to the white farmers as Biden gives $4 billion to Black and colored farmers. Nobody wants to talk about the empty HR 40 that they want to study a cashless reparations with an over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth gap while we are wiped completely off the monopoly board. Nobody wants to talk about the $41,000 median national income and the $340,000 median national home price. Nobody wants to talk about how we got here. Back to more of her text. These officers shouldn't get to decide if someone gets to live or not. It's time these officers start getting held accountable. Murdering people and abusing your power while doing it is not doing your job. It shouldn't have to take people to actually go through something to understand it's not okay. It's called having a heart and understanding right from wrong. Me speaking. It's called we pay you Mickey Fickies to protect and serve. And then we pay the civil suits from you executing us with impunity. And you're hired because your First Amendment rights are valued over our Black lives. They're hiring you as domestic terrorists, saying to not do so is an impediment on your First Amendment rights to get gainful employment with our tax dollars to come into our communities and execute us and get away with murder. which is what Chauvin was teaching the 3 other immigrant glacier donkeys. Teaching them how to get away with murder. But for Miss Frazier's viral video and the angels God put on the scene that day. There was this feeling of celebration in George Floyd Square. The streets surrounding George Floyd Square became a block party today, with competing DJs blasting music, multiple barbecue stands, people dancing in the streets, and children chasing one another with water guns. The area near 38th Street and Chicago Avenue had resembled a wake early in the morning, with people coming to solemnly pay their respects. By 4:45 p.m., there were hundreds of people enjoying food, admiring the dozens of art installations, and listening to DJ and a brass band. There was an open mic as well, where poets took turns. As the day wore on, with temperatures nearing 90 degrees, almost 20 degrees higher than the May average for Minneapolis, people kept coming. A stage had been set up for a concert sponsored by several companies, including the Minnesota Vikings, United Health Group, and Best Buy. Let me see how y'all are doing. Miss Letty K Love, I see you, fam. Thank you for joining the live. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Satra Del Reed 360, I see you, family. Brian says all Congress is looking to do regarding the January insurrection is making a Capitol riot commission. I guess they'll study the events of said day like they're going to study reparations. Brian also says, this seems to be the MO for pacifying Black families whose kin are slain by police. Throw them some money and invite them to random events, functions. No real justice needed. That's all they do is pander. They got to keep the sheep a walking to the polls. What's up, Trey Lincoln? I see you, family. Avery Fennell, thank you for joining the live, my love. If Darnella Frazier hadn't been there recording, he would be on excessive force incident 19, 20, 21, 22, etc. Clearly, police body cameras are not the answer. Brian also says, the morbid part about this is how anniversaries are meant to be celebratory. What exactly are we celebrating here? Certainly not any legislative progress for ADOX. He ain't ever lied. Where's the lie? I would like to see, I'm going to keep this up. I just read the comments. I'm going to finish this out. Give us 10 more minutes on this. We're going to stay on it. And I'll expound on the stories of today's events that I feel need elaboration, like I did Miss Frazier's words. I would like to see the fire keep burning. Protesters gather in Brooklyn. Everywhere, family. Azali Cyril said she could not protest last year after George Floyd was killed. Fear of COVID-19 kept her away from crowds. But today, Miss Cyril, 24, was one of those gathering outside Barclays Center to protest against police killings on the anniversary of Mr. Floyd's death. The demonstration at Barclays Center was one of several held across New York City on today as activists, politicians, and members of the public sought to boost momentum for police reform. I would like to see the fire keep burning, Ms. Cyril said. I don't want it to go out. Awareness of police brutality has grown, but change is slow to come, the activists say in Philadelphia. About 50 representatives of labor, community, and faith-based groups gathered late this afternoon in Philly to commemorate the anniversary of Mr. George Floyd's execution. Some of these words are mine, by a white police officer, and to reflect on whether the event has done anything to change race relations in America. Attendees at the gathering organized by the Philadelphia Labor for Black Lives Coalition said public awareness of police brutality against the Black community had risen since Mr. Floyd's murder, but added that it was going to take much longer than a year for law enforcement practices and attitudes to change to the point where Black people are treated fairly. With an executive order, this would stop, or at least ease up. If you, in qualified immunity, stop hiring domestic terrorists and take their pensions when they execute an unarmed Black man, woman, or child, this would stop. I'm scrolling, family. I saw here we go. I wanted to share about this one. In Scotland, Greece, England, and Germany, demonstrators remember Mr. George Floyd. The protests that followed George Floyd's killing last year spread across the US and the globe. On the anniversary of his death, demonstrators gathered for a socially distanced rally in Berlin, in Glasgow, London, and outside the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. Demonstrators took a knee and raised their fist into the air. A Black Lives Matter banner hung outside the U.S. Embassy in Athens. The sign said, if you are not anti-racist, you are complicit. Louisville remembers a movement seeking justice for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. There were no planned gatherings in Louisville today to commemorate the anniversary of George Floyd's death, but starting on Friday, a weekend of events organized by the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression will mark the one-year anniversary of the first protest at Jefferson Square Park downtown, which has come to be known as Injustice Square. Those demonstrations, which lasted for months, demanded an accounting not just for the death of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, but also for the death of Breonna Taylor, a Black medical worker who was shot and killed by Louisville police officers in March 2020 during a botched raid on her apartment. Quote, for me, it's a weird anniversary, said Greg Capillo, 33, who participated in the demonstrations at Injustice Square. How do you commemorate the time you got brutalized with tear gas and shot at for 2 days? To Mr. Brian C. Johnson's point in the chat, Shamika Parrish Wright, 44, the co-leader of the Kentucky Alliance, says Injustice Square represents the longest standing social justice movement in Louisville's history and a place for young activists to come together. Quote, I want them to become the next Maxine Waters or John Lewis's of the world, said Miss Parrish Wright, who is running for mayor next year. I want them to be better than Maxine Waters and John Lewis. I want them to actually give a damn about ADOX and fight on behalf of our people exclusively in the way the other groups fight for their own exclusively. Quote, it's slow progress, but it's progress happening, she said. More people are attending city council meetings and getting on boards and commissions. And that's what we wanted when we set up Injustice Square. It's not a job well done yet, but because we still don't have justice for Breonna Taylor, but we're getting there. Why last year's protests are thought to be the largest movement in U.S. history. The Black Lives Matter protest that began in response to Mr. Floyd's killing in Minneapolis grew quickly and reached a peak of more than 500 protests in cities and towns across America in a single day on June 6, 2020. Polling conducted that June suggested that about 15 million to 26 million people in the United States participated in demonstrations over the deaths of George Floyd and others in the weeks after his death. These figures indicate the protests were the largest movement in the country's history, according to interviews with scholars and crowd counting experts. Across the United States, there were more than 4,700 demonstrations, or an average of 140 per day, between May 26th and the end of June, according to a Times analysis at the time, with turnout ranging from dozens to tens of thousands in about 2,500 small towns and large cities. Teachers bring George Floyd into the classroom on the anniversary of his death. As Americans mourn, honored, and remember George Floyd on the anniversary of his death, educators across the country grappled with how to address Mr. Floyd's death in their schools. Stephen Gupton, a middle school teacher in Durham, North Carolina, knew he had to create a space for his students, who are mostly Black and Hispanic, to speak about the death of Mr. Floyd. Mr. Gupton, who is Black, said that he would not duck and dodge the difficult conversations about racial justice that he believes should be happening in classrooms. What I did do was make sure that we are reminded that today was a day that the entire country suffered a loss in the wake of the killing, he said. Mr. Gupton teaches health science to grades 6 through 8 at James E. Shepherd Magnet Middle School, and said that in the past year, his students have been increasingly eager to have conversations about racial inequities. The school is in a hybrid learning model, so he offered an online space similar to a discussion forum where he asked students open-ended questions about the killing of Mr. Floyd and the movement that followed. Some of his questions included, where were you when this happened? How did you feel? What do you remember? How do you feel today? How do you feel that we can get beyond this as a country? Participation was voluntary, but he said the students seemed engaged and spoke about whether or not they thought protests had led to meaningful impact, the lessons they took away from the demonstrations, and what outcomes they would have liked to see from the trial of Derek Chauvin. Quote, I want them to be forward thinkers, and I want them to know that they do not have the power to change these things, Mr. Gupton said. Correction. I want them to know that they do have the power to change these things. Awo Okekor M.R.E. Price, a committee member for the National Black Lives Matter at School, a Black-led group of educators, parents, and organizers, said that awareness of the anniversary was crucial for students to heal together in the aftermath of Mr. Floyd's killing. Quote, because we have this collective trauma experience, there's a collective healing experience that also should happen, she said. And part of that is the remembering and centering that person's life as a life that mattered and was not insignificant. In public statements, educators pushed for tangible racial justice reforms they said would protect the lives of students. Becky Pringle, the president of the National Education Association, noted in a statement that it was time to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Quote, going to school or returning home from an after-school job, visiting friends, or going to a cookout or concert or playground should not put students' lives at risk, she said. But sadly, in communities of color, this is the reality. We're at 7:04, family. It's time for me to bid you adieu. I'd like to pray our prayer protection over you, that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever ADOX and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. And with that said, family, until next time, Mr. Johnson, you got that right. Tomorrow, 12 noon, for your segment of As the World of ADOX Turns, your midday wake-up call. You make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. Know that I love you, Black. I love you strong. Peace.